Muzaffarnagar is not a town for entrepreneurship. Anything related to women, most women, I would say like 100% of women around me were dependent financially, whether it was from rural or even like the privileged families. You have to try to be as stringent about your quality as
Mhm.
factory product would be, to the
Mhm.
best capability that you can.
And one thing that gives you hope for India's sustainable future.
Just the power of having to control your own finances gives you confidence, gives you a voice.
People now sell pre-loved clothes and thrifted clothes, and we make a big deal out of it. But thrifting, I feel, was in our culture a long while. Yeah.
I get excited by seeing women who are empowered, and I get frustrated seeing, women who are unable to change their lives. I discovered that there were these women from Muslim communities who were amazing at charpai weaving. I would say like 200 plus of funding applications while being pregnant a day before giving birth. 150 women showed up uh,
Hmm.
from a community that where women are not allowed to step outside their house. So it's been a powerful journey, I would say. Be the boss of your story, because it's not about the sob stories. It's about the boss ones.
Hi, Gauri. Welcome to Local Samosa. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much. And I am very grateful from what I hear to be the first person you're interviewing post your own delivery. So thank you for having me here.
I have been following your work, your personal journey as well. So before Sirohi, how did you get into this? Because Muzaffarnagar is not very famous for, entrepreneurship, and especially women entrepreneurship. So that is not quite often association that, you will get to hear. So how were your early years? How did you, like, what was the journey from there to here?
So, so the journey has been actually an interesting one. I am from Muzaffarnagar itself, and that's the reason of our work. And I went to boarding school when I was 6 years of age, and
Mhm.
my parents sent me to school because they didn't have like good education or good schools in Muzaffarnagar, and essentially I realized that going to a boarding school at the age of 6, I was actually very very good with sports. I played basketball at national level. I was an athlete, and I won over like 50 gold medals in school. So I was like really, I became really fearless, very
Amazing.
independent in school, and I was
Right.
really thriving, because of the fact that I was into sport, and I was decent in academics. Uh,
Hmm.
I would come home to Muzaffarnagar, and like you said, Muzaffarnagar is not a town for entrepreneurship. Anything related to women, most women, I would say like 100% of women around me were dependent financially, whether it was
Right.
from rural or even like the privileged families on the male
Hmm.
counterparts, because it was just not a thing to work, whether you had
Hmm.
work or not. And that would really confuse me, because I was like, here I am in a school where you are sort of taught to fly and just be
Right.
anyone who you can be. And then I come back home and I see that my mom and my chachi and my bua worked actually, but and started her own business. But
Okay.
pretty much 100% of women around me were financially dependent, and it confused
Mm.
me. And I think from my journey of being in Muzaffarnagar during the holidays and then growing up to where I am today, was always the question that I wanted to answer, that how do we create incomes for women, including my own
Mhm.
mother, who want to be
Right.
financially independent and don't have opportunity.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
where Muzaffarnagar comes in the picture. And in hindsight, I think while I'm very proud of what we do and the incomes we're creating for the women, like to start a company, they say that you should solve for a gap in the market. uh,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Right.
but for Muzaffarnagar, there was really like it's a belt known for sugar cane, for rice mills, paper mills, but nothing to do with craft. And here we are. So it's been a journey in itself. The second one is that today my mom works with us at Sirui, and at the age of 60
Mhm.
is when she finally became financially independent, because
Right.
started working with us. She started earning an income, not asking my dad for money, and being confident enough to even speak on stage.
Mhm.
Celebrated our 5 years of Siruhi, and she spoke on stage and she said that I've never had this confidence to be able to speak in front of a crowd, and it's happened because I am financially independent and I feel my voice is coming out. Those were her words. So I think
Right.
just the power of having to control your own finances gives you confidence, gives you a voice, and that's where my
Mm.
mom is today.
Yeah, it's great, like along with other women that you're helping, your mother who has been so pivotal part of your life, she's
Yeah,
also the experiences. This is amazing.
yeah,
And this at after 60 plus, this is like a second inning, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so how did you were working in finance sector if I'm not wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, so where did you realize that this is not my calling and I have to like figure out something else? Or was it like always your dream? Was it like built in your childhood? How was it?
So, I think I come from a family where I've always seen my dad, in business. And, I've seen him hustle. I've seen him at a factory since at 3 a.m., 5 a.m., drive from Delhi to Muzaffarnagar, at 1 a.m. and come back with toys and still have that energy. And I think somewhere for me, that was very inspirational growing up, solving every problem and just being like a hustler, and just being like
Right.
somebody who was like, he believed he could do anything and everything. And that's the kind of energy he passed to me. And so I think a lot of it just, what you see growing up, you imbibe, it becomes a part of you, just it's innate. And so a part of it was that to see my dad doing his own business, but a lot of it was what I do today represents a lot of frustration growing up, the dichotomy of seeing like educated smart women who have the skill set and ability to do something with their lives and not being able to do anything about
Hmm.
it. And I can't explain it because I was in the banking space. I was with a Deutsche Bank and I was earning very well. And, my career chart at this point of time, the progression would have been insane. But I think sometimes you do what you do because there is a higher power. I like to believe that. And for me, I think it just runs in my veins. I get excited by seeing women who are empowered, and I get frustrated seeing, women who are unable to change their lives. And it's just,
Hmm.
I think that's representative in the work that I do today. So that's what it is. And so yeah, so I think part of it is just growing up, the frustration, and trying to solve for my own frustration,
Right.
anyone else's.
So we got you wanted to do something for women empowerment, but what led you to found Sirohi? And why name Sirohi?
Right. So Sirohi actually, so when I switched my banking, when I switched from banking to what I do now, is that I started a not-for-profit in 2012 called Skilled Samaritan, which is still the
Hmm.
not-for-profit arm of Sirohi. And
Hmm.
that's where I discovered a village called Sirohi in Haryana. It's not
Oh,
everything Sirohi is the village, is the district from Rajasthan, but this was a small
right.
in Faridabad Mandal, which wasn't even on Google Maps, at that point of time. It's like,
Oh,
put that village on the map, literally.
right.
And this was a village where I discovered that there were these women from Muslim communities who were amazing at charpai weaving. And
Hmm.
but they were very conservative to the extent that they were not allowed to work. They would get married by the time they were 13 years of age. I've seen
Hmm.
young girls who are 13 and 15 get married, in front of my eyes. And I think part of that just makes you want to change things, right? So I think it was one of those incidents that I saw at Sirohi village where I wanted to realize that there are women who are smart, they're not educated, but they have craft skills. So how can we leverage their craft skills to make products? And
Hmm.
the creativity in me just, I think, got ignited. And it's honestly, it's 7 years later in 2021 is when I started a for-profit called Sirohi, where the aim has been to use the existing craft skills of women to give them access to high quality design and trainings to make products that you
Hmm.
see on our website today.
So can you tell me more about Skill Samaritan that you initially worked on and that switch? How did that happen?
So Skill Samaritan. So while I after my school, I went to Mumbai to do my um, I went to my undergrad in economics, and then I went to do my master's in at Warwick Business School. And while I was there, I went to South America to a small place called Trujillo, which is in Peru, and it's
Hmm.
10 hours from Lima, the capital. And that's where I worked with a lot of women,
Hmm.
who were single mothers, to give them loans, microcredit loans, to start their businesses. And I think
Okay.
to me that was a very exciting time in my life. I was, in my early 20s, right after, during my master's education. And that's when I discovered that while my degree is in finance, I can do something
Mm-hmm.
in development, because I saw people from the World Bank, United Nations. It was a very holistic sort of a group there.
Mm-hmm.
And but the sequential lifestyle that we lead, as Indians, school, college,
Mm-hmm.
masters, or just this degree mein kara hai, usi degree mein, we get our degree. So I went
Right.
on to work with Deutsche Bank
Mm-hmm.
as a quantitative analyst in Mumbai. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when, I think I just got really bored and frustrated that what am I doing every day? And I just one day just quit my job, and I came back home, much to the confusion of my parents. And I said that I want to start something of my own. And
Mm-hmm.
so my experience in South America is when I started Skilled Samaritan. And the meaning was that you can use your skill to do some good. Skilled and Samaritan means a good human being, a good person, right? And so that's where the name of the company came about. And we
Mm-hmm.
initially started by seeing how could we find volunteering opportunities for people from India internationally to work with not-for-profits in India,
Mm-hmm.
and use their expertise to strengthen not-for-profits and still gain hands-on experience. What I did in South America, so something similar. So that's
Right.
where the name and all that came about. And with Skill Samaritan, eventually we ended up working with Sirohi village and many more villages around to light them using solar lights. So in
Okay.
2012, I started a project through some CSR funding. And that time there was no CSR. I got some grants to be able to set up a foundation, where we lit Sirohi and all these villages using solar lights. And that's how
Mm-hmm.
my work came about. And during my time in those communities, I discovered a lot of women. I understood what's happening in this region, how, what is the dynamics, what do people really need. And that's where, the foundation, and that was my work at this Samaritan at that time.
So as you mentioned, you were at a small village, Rohit, and as you were a solo founder, especially a women founder, didn't you face any kind of barriers, even from the people who are you are trying to help? Uh, how did you manage that?
I have to say, and as non humble as it may sound, but I think coming from Muzaffarnagar, which has been a gangster town in itself, partly I think everyone in Muzaffarnagar feels they're gangsters. And, so Sirohi was a completely Muslim Jat community. And yes, in hindsight, if I look at it, I'm like, what was I thinking? And as a
Hmm.
girl alone, I would walk into that village and I would like talk to all the families there. And it was like hardcore, like a Jat community. And but I think it was just some form of fearlessness, some sort of belief, and
Hmm.
in combination with delusion that all entrepreneurs have. So a mix of all of that just led me to do what I do. And honestly, I didn't ever think about safety. I never thought about कुछ हो जाएगा, कैसे होगा, मैं अकेली यहाँ पे घूम रही हूँ. But it just happened. And I think that's what entrepreneurship really is, right? And I think that's how it all worked out. But yes, if I look back, like me now, and I think paranoia for humans just increases as we grow older. Uh,
Right.
the fear factor was like, I think very minimal at that point of time, that led me to work in these communities like some hero.
So according to you, there were no biggest any barriers kind
There
of
were,
thing
of
that.
course, a lot of barriers. There were multiple barriers because when we set up, when we went to these communities, we said we had a proper business model where we said कि आप currently you're spending 550 rupees on electricity. अगर आप ये solar lamps लगाएंगे, हम एक village
Hmm.
fund create करते हैं, उसमें आप 70 rupees डालो, आपके घर में लाइट, दो लाइट, एक पंखा, मोबाइल चार्जर, सब चल जाएगा, आपको बिजली का बिल आपका कम हो जाएगा. So then,
Hmm.
people were like, wow, ये तो बहुत अच्छा है. And for some time, they started paying that 70 rupees to build this corpus
Hmm.
that would be used to maintain the village and, the project over, sustain
Right.
it. But after a few months, people start paying, and then, there would be gundas that would come, they're saying that hum to paise nahi denge. And, so there were all these challenges. And I think to get a community to adopt something, one thing I learned was that if you go to a restaurant, right? And for example, and they give you distillery water, which they charge you 100 rupees for, and they give you like tap water, most people will say कि हमें तो सादा पानी चाहिए, right? So
Hmm.
similarly, in I think rural communities where we think that उनको light चाहिए, पंखे चाहिए, ये सब चाहिए, they don't want it. You tell them कि आपको clean water चाहिए, they are very happy with the कुएं का पानी. They are used to that
Hmm.
water. So I
Right.
think the realization was that as people who are living in cities, we think the people need that, but you need to
Hmm.
understand the needs of a community. You need
Hmm.
to do a needs assessment to figure out okay, what is it that they really want, and basis that you sort of solve for a problem. And I think
Hmm.
that's where a lot of challenges in the business model came about because people started defaulting on the payments. Um, just to get like because the village was also far away, and I think development,
Hmm.
the not-for-profit sector was never considered a social business. uh,
Hmm.
People
Definitely.
always thought that अगर हम गरीब हैं हमें फ्री चीजें मिलनी चाहिए.
Hmm.
So I think all these, the mindset was very different. It was, I think, from mindset, behavior, just getting people to understand that we're doing something for you. All these
Hmm.
challenges, honestly, at the end of 3 to 4 years, led to the project sort of not scaling,
Hmm.
and me being super young. But I think essentially we do see that in ground level communities, you have to understand the mindset of the people, and that's where
Right.
the biggest challenge was.
So when you started Sirohi, you had to again convince one of the member
Yeah.
weaver to join you. How did you change that mindset for them?
So I think I didn't have to change anything, honestly. I found one very brave woman. Ironically, her name is Gauhar, like mine, Gauri. And she told me कि मुझे काम करना है, मुझे अपनी जिंदगी बदलनी है. तो, and I knew that there was this community that makes products using weaving techniques,
Okay.
and they make charpais using
Hmm.
normal weaving techniques. And I
So they
went,
were already in the business. They were already working for it.
yes, that's it. So they were just making charpais. That's all they were.
Okay.
And then essentially I realized that these people are but everyone said no कि हम काम नहीं करेंगे, हमें काम करना अलाउड नहीं है, हमारी कॉम में लेडीज काम नहीं करती हैं.
Hmm.
So, and I would just at that point Instagram was just starting. I would post photos of my vision. Honestly, I would
Hmm.
rise and I would take photos from other people who were doing interesting stuff, and I would post. And then people started commenting, liking that how can we get these products. I would take
Hmm.
to international websites, which was completely like not right. And then anyway, people said, "How can we buy these products?" And then slowly,
Yeah.
slowly, I started going to these communities to give them
Hmm.
designs. So I went to the
Hmm.
first woman. She made it, and she said that and it was very difficult because they were from a design perspective, they only knew how to weave a charpai, which is plain, which is flat, right? But we said, let's make something which is functional, like a box or a tray.
Hmm.
And it took
Hmm.
time to understand कि ऐसी weaving को हम कैसे ऊपर करें, side पे करें, things like that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then she made 37 products in 2 months, this one lady. And she earned 5,500 rupees from me, for making these products back in the day. And
Hmm.
when she earned the money, that's when the second lady joined. And the more we started posting and getting
Hmm.
customers, that's when the work started scaling, and more women joined. And today, from one
Hmm.
woman in that community, we work with over 550 artisans. We celebrated our 5 years 2 weeks ago at Sirohi, and
Oh, amazing.
almost 150 women showed up
Hmm.
from a community that where women are not allowed to step outside their house. So it's been a powerful journey, I would say.
So, what is the kind of change that you have seen in these women, except for their income capability? Like anything in their mindset, or are there are
So
there more women who are joining not just your craft but other things?
So absolutely, I think in year one, I said, "ये क्या कर रही हूँ मैं?" Like I was like, I have to be pagal to be doing this, and like what is gone in me. But there was just one woman, and she would always talk to me in a burqa. I could only see her eyes. She would never. And 6 months later, the burqa came up. Then one year later, like I could see like what she was wearing under the burqa in terms of her clothes, her salwar kameez. Then
Hmm.
उसके बाद, like they wear an abaya, that came out, so then I could see their hair. Then essentially I more women joined. Then they said कि हम आपकी फैक्ट्री पे नहीं आ सकते, आपको घर पे ही काम देना पड़ेगा. 3 years
Hmm.
later, they started coming to the factory to train more women. 4 years
Wow.
later, like 50 women showed up at the factory to do trainings. And
Mm-hmm.
5 years later, like, 150 ladies showed up at our annual day. So I think the communal change has been fantastic. The first artisan bought herself a house, land,
Um,
3 years into working with us. The artisans who work with us have bought, rickshaws, TVs. Their life, I think, has been transformed because of them and not their husbands. Because even these communities, the men have seasonal jobs. And
hmm.
because of our work and our consistency in terms of giving them orders, because we want to make great products, we want to do great marketing, we've been able to see that. We've been able to see more and more women earn money consistently while the men are still sitting at home. So in a lot of the cases, the men have also joined our work. They support with packaging or shipping the product.
Mm-hmm.
Say village se factory pe lekar aana, all those things. So the communal change has obviously been fantastic.
I'm pretty sure the children of these women will also see and obviously take it ahead and not just sit back home. If your mom is more towards working, the kids tend to learn that and support that and see take that like take charge of their own lives is what I feel.
No, absolutely. I think, it's a lot of the kids, or a lot of when the artisans are coming to work, a lot of the time they don't have the, privilege to leave their kids in a creche or anywhere. So the kids come along while the women are working. So there's
Right.
or their mothers work, earn money at the end of it. And I think, I'm sure, I mean, I see my own kids. I have two girls, and both of them are constantly talking about Sirohi. And I have a 4-year-old now who says that, Mama, if women earn, they can earn money and buy themselves anything they want. Because she hears me talking nonstop about this, so she is learning that.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
can see it with my own kids. I can only imagine what it is for other women, who have.
Right. Right. So how do you maintain how do you maintain the balance of, crafting a luxurious, sustainable product or a brand and then maintaining the authenticity of your product and staying true to your grassroots? How do you put a balance to that?
So I think for me, it's we have two organizations, and that's how I think we really maintain the balance. Where in the not for
Hmm.
profit, we completely focus on impact, skilling the artisans, making sure they have the right kind of resources to make super high quality products. We don't compromise on quality. For us as
Hmm.
a brand, while we have a story, our focus is a product. We want to make a great product, and we want people to buy the product because they absolutely love it. I would never
Hmm.
want anyone to buy the product to support our cause. I want them to buy it because they feel Sirohi is a great brand. They make amazing baskets and boxes, and it's going to help me, whether it is decorate my home or for my wedding or baby shower. It's really going to transform things for me. So
Hmm.
essentially, I think for me that has been important. And then the second part is the impact. So that's where we
Hmm.
don't sort of compromise on our quality, the way the product looks. And, so the brand Sirohi only focuses primarily on ensuring a great experience, like any D2C brand or any brand would.
Right. And so, as you mentioned, because you are into a luxury gifting space, right? So, yeah, my question was, what role did your collaborations with brands like Uniqlo and WeWork help you in scaling up the impact and your business?
So I think as you just said it, WeWork and Uniqlo are global names. Just to be able to be showcased on their social pages was the visibility that we needed as a brand, to be able to say that, hey, this is a young brand that is creating incomes, making amazing products, and we
Mhm.
showcase their work. And I think that visibility helped us sort of get additional partnerships. And
Mhm.
for us as a brand, the most important thing is selling a product, and then essentially that's the way the artisans earn money, right? It's a circular sort of cycle there. Just our partnerships have really helped us get that momentum and really like scale up exponentially, where we got visibility from a lot of other organizations, companies, individuals, because
Mhm.
online, I would say visibility, even offline in the stores of Uniqlo, we had our banners there, and and all.
Mhm.
I think a lot of funding that has come to us has been for people to see that, okay, they've partnered with large brands and they have the capability, resources, and ability to sort of partner with large brands, right? Because people
Hmm.
will not partner with you if you don't have the ability to sort of service what their requirement is. So that's where I think
So,
it helped other partnerships too for us.
so what do you think? The acceptance of the brand comes from more from an Indian audience or international audience?
I have to say, from a story impact perspective, it's an international audience. But from a
Hmm.
product perspective, it's an Indian audience because what Indians care about is a great product and price. That's about it. They will clap for the story, but they don't care enough to buy a product for the story. But internationally, people want a great product that has a story. They would prefer a product that has a story versus a product that is, you know, cheaper or
Hmm.
made in China or so I think
Right.
that's where the difference lies.
And while you are scaling, how do you maintain the product quality?
I think there are two aspects when it comes to quality. One is that the product cannot be consistent. Like you said,
Hmm.
अगर आप एक basket बना रहे हो and it's a factory basket, the print will always be the same, right? There would be no one flower is like becoming like orange and one flower is like yellow. It's always going to be the same. But in a handmade product, if you're weaving the design and if you're weaving it, there will be like maybe a few inches, one a flower will come here instead of here, something like that. So, so I think there's a difference between consistency in the design versus
Hmm.
quality, where
Right.
quality of the product should be intact, where even if there's inconsistency in the design, and a
Hmm.
flower that should have been exactly at like a 90-degree angle is maybe at like 70 degrees, that is okay. But I think in terms of quality, the product should still be like amazing and it should still like
Hmm.
final touches that it should before being sent to a customer. So I think for me those are the two differences, and I feel like a lot of artisan brands tend to compromise on that because they say कि अच्छा हाथ से बनाए तो ठीक है,
Hmm.
I personally think ठीक नहीं है. Like you have to try to be as stringent about your quality as
Hmm.
factory product would be, to the
Hmm.
best capability that you can.
Right. Now, as Indian crafts is growing, even in the global markets,
Yeah.
people are talking about it. Maybe it's a buzzword, just a buzzword to get an attention or,
Yeah.
cater to a different kind of audience or get another kind of audience. But what are the impacts that you're seeing? What is the Indian craft economy right now, and what is the scope of growth in the next few years?
So I think there's a dichotomy, right? I mean, there is one aspect, and I can say that because I feel like the growth is always representative of the kind of funding you see in the sectors, because where
Hmm.
people want to invest. So there is, I think, one aspect where people want to invest in scalability, where you're showing an impact for millions and thousands of lives. In the craft sector, it has to be a very deep impact because you can't work with like 50,000 artisans at once unless you're
Hmm.
skilling or something when you're making a product. But I think so. And then there is this whole conversation around AI and deep tech, and but when it comes to the craft space, I think people are just trying to keep alive a piece of heritage
Hmm.
culture.
Hmm.
And I do feel like there is a small group of people who want to still fund and support the space. And you see
Hmm.
larger brands now wanting to buy from handmade and support handmade globally, but I still think it's a very global phenomena and not Indian. India is,
Okay.
I think, just scaling at a very high speed and trying to compete with China. But internationally, I feel like we are slightly more accepted in terms of product and as a category.
So if you want to, cater to your global audience, how can Indian craft community can compete with them or, at least have cross checks that these are the things that we have to have in your brand so that, you can reach global.
So I think there are a lot of people who are making amazing products, and there are two ways, and I don't have the right answer to it because we don't have any very large scale international partnerships with an IKEA or a Pottery Barn. But there are two ways. One is that IKEA, Pottery Barn, Crate and Barrel. These people buy in large volumes, but the margins are minimal.
Mm-hmm.
Where the artisan is getting an income. But for me, I want to build a profitable brand. I want it to be a for-profit brand which scales, and we're able to operate like a business, not just a not-for-profit. So, in case if you're looking for just large scale production with minimal margins, and it's a game of volumes, then I think partnerships with larger brands like IKEA, Crate and Barrel,
Mm-hmm.
who also have very stringent processes. They need like your factory to be a certain way. But essentially, if you're there are some businesses. So I think there are two aspects to it from my understanding of whatever I know of the business so far. Is one is like collaborating. If you want to take your craft and your product to an international market, is to partner with retailers who already have a strong market access. So
Okay.
IKEA, Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn, like some of the large US, European based retailers, you partner with them,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
you make a few products that which they typically want volumes of. They want it in like 50,000, 1 million pieces, and
Mm-hmm.
typically buy it at X price and sell it at 5 to 10x the price to make their margins. So that way
Mm-hmm.
it's a game of volumes. You operate on minimal margins, and that's how you take your craft to a global audience. But unfortunately, there is no made in India tag, or there is no name of there's no story, right? It's an IKEA product or a
Right.
product. The second is that, there is a second tier of retailers who have 5 to 6 stores, and, it's small batch production, um, where you're making multiple SKUs, and you're sort of, retailing and doing consignment, or either people buy
Mm-hmm.
outright for some of these people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another way of taking it to the global audience. And otherwise, I think in the age that we are today, you have Amazon Global, you have so many e-commerce websites, there's cross-border trade. There are so many ways to sort of take your product, but you have to decide like what business is for you. For
Mm-hmm.
And just to extend to that, is for Sirohi, we've realized for us B2B is a business where for us it's
Mm-hmm.
easier for us to, it's about unit economics, with the kind of like commissions, charges it takes
Right.
to send a product internationally. Unfortunately, artisan products are still considered, low value products. People do not want to pay very high for these products. So
Mm-hmm.
the cost cut karke, my revenues might be great, but the bottom line is still like red. If you are in the business of trying to sell to an Amazon or to global
Okay.
retailers, so your
Okay.
numbers will look great, uh, but otherwise, I think just being in the space, for us being in a B2B space works better, because
Mm-hmm.
just buy from us in bulk, and then they can do whatever they would like with it.
So now you guys are funded by IMA, right? So when did you decide like this is the time I should step into funding, and how do you raise funds, like being firstly sorry to say it like
A
that,
woman
but
entrepreneur.
getting from an entrepreneur in a artisan backed brand, and kind of in a social league, people will see your brand as a
Social
social
business.
impacted brand, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you crack that code?
So I think tracking the code is as simple as just having the numbers. Your books need to be great, like any other business. You could be a woman, be in the social space, but at the end of it, people will invest in an investable business, somewhere where they can see their value grow as a business, and they can see the impact. In our
Hmm.
case, we're an impact oriented business, and we're very fortunate to partner with funders who are not just seeing our numbers from a business revenue perspective, but they're also seeing our impact on the ground. They're seeing how we scale from 1 to 2 artisans to 500 artisans. They're seeing how we're trying to grow
Hmm.
from one state to 5 states. And I think those numbers do the talk for us. I
Hmm.
personally feel like I do see the challenges, because when I've been pregnant, I've seen investors say, "Kya acha baad mein aa jana, why don't you give birth?" Or like like things like that. And I've had like people who are partnered with us saying, "कि अच्छा female entrepreneur हैं तो हम आपकी ज़्यादा मदद कर देते हैं," like they're doing us a favor. You hear all of these things, and but at the end of it, the struggles are real when it comes to raising funds for women. And my journey, while my books are great, my Unfortunately, my pace is probably a lot slower than a man or a person who doesn't have kids or who is full time, doing what they're doing, living in the city
Right.
where their work is. I also am a remote founder. But I've been very fortunate to have people who've just believed in what we do. And like I said, our books have spoken for themselves. So, in that space, we started off by getting funding from Upaya, which is a US based impact fund,
Mm-hmm.
and then from IMA, then from Will Grow. And honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I've hustled. I have applied for over, like, I would say like 200 plus of, funding applications while being pregnant a day before giving birth. And I've hustled. I've worked really hard, and I would say
Mm-hmm.
it's been, you know a result of the hard work as well, because 98% of the applications got rejected, but 2% worked. We are here because of that 2%.
Great, great. Good for you.
Yeah.
So what's next for Sirogi and for you? What's the dream you're chasing now?
So I think I've just stopped chasing. I work hard. I have a vision. I have a goal, and our goal is to be the best in class brand from India that is making sustainable baskets and packaging products. We realize what our forte is in the last 5 years and what we do well, what people are buying. What
Mm-hmm.
we're introducing at Sirohi is a line of alternative packaging where we're saying that as opposed to spending, $1,000 or 1,500 on a luxury box, which typically anybody who retails a product at above 15,000 rupee MRP, luxury brands that are doing watches, jewelry, fashion
Mm-hmm.
designers. We're saying that, hey, we'll make some beautiful handmade baskets and boxes for you, which can be reusable.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to throw your customers money in the dustbin. um,
Right.
we're looking at like larger B2B strategic partnerships, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can replace packaging and become a source of alternative packaging, which is creating radical impact. And I think I'm very clear in the kind of vision we want, what are the partnerships we want. It's about just making sure we reach those partners, getting them to believe and converting, and it's going to happen.
Okay. So thank you for the podcast. Thank you for being here and sharing your amazing story. Uh, I'm sure audience has a lot to take away from this, and you being a great inspiration for many. So now we are moving to a rapid fire
Yeah,
section, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
let's go.
So one daily ritual you swear by for your focus.
uh, Two, I work out every day and I meditate every day.
Amazing. A quote that you keeps you inspired.
uh, don't give up, just show up.
One habit you're trying to build or break.
I think the habit I'm trying to build is to speak less, hear more, uh,
Mhm.
and like speak as minimal and conserve my energy. And the second I'm trying to break is judgment. Try to sort of not be have judgment of others or come to conclusions before understanding the entire
Mhm.
story.
A book or podcast that shaped your thinking.
There was this podcast by Kunal Shah, the founder of Incred, which talks about, the kind of how women shape economies and, the number of bank accounts in India. And I don't remember the name of the podcast, but I remember it's like a 1.5 hour podcast. And the way he sort of articulates and the logic that he has
Mhm.
to a lot of spending in India and like different communities like Gujaratis, Banyas, Marwaris, and why they do what they do. I think that was really phenomenal. And
One
another book,
piece of
and a book for me was The Wealth That Money Can't Buy by Robin Sharma. I think it just transformed my life. I read it last year, and it was, it's changed the way I think. Amazing book.
one piece of advice for an entrepreneur.
Show up, just show up every day.
One piece of advice for a women entrepreneur.
Don't give up.
And one piece of advice for an entrepreneur who's working in a social enterprise sector.
There is be the boss of your story, because it's not about the sob stories, it's about the boss ones.
Amazing. A craft technique you wish more people knew about.
Charpai weaving, people don't consider charpai weaving a craft.
I've grown up, grown up laying on
Up with
there,
it, but
doop
no thought,
sekna.
it's like so in your face. You're like a craft, thorna hai. It's a craft. We made a craft out of something that wasn't a craft. I think it's a craft.
No, it was such a North Indian kind of memory कि
Yeah.
सर्दी है, धूप
Huh.
है, चारपाई है, we are
Huh.
sleeping है.
The best memories that a lot of people have had back in the days from the charpai, right? Because like a lot of family events, everything was on a charpai.
Your comfort food after a long day.
Dal chawal, yellow dal chawal. Oh my god,
Success in just one word.
empowerment.
I mean, one um, one small sustainable habit you would never skip.
I just carry a water bottle everywhere. I try not getting like Bisleri or plastic.
What's the most underrated sustainable swap that everybody should know?
Carry your own water bottle, yeah, wherever you go. I mean, like everyone's carrying standees to hydrate themselves. Just make sure you're carrying your water bottle to keep your hydration levels up, and just get rid of the plastic bottles.
What's harder, selling sustainability or practicing sustainability?
I think practicing, it's hard.
One thing that gives you hope for India's sustainable future.
Myself.
Your message to people who think sustainability is just a trend.
Um, I think when you see the climate crisis,
Mhm,
when you see wildfires in America, when you see, new age diseases, when you see, you know, water levels rise or reduce, when you see increased tsunamis, think about
mhm,
the smaller actions you can take, whether it is conserving water, whether it is your carbon emissions, whether it's your travel, whether it's carrying that water bottle, whether it's the junk you throw, whether it's the amount you spend on your Diwali gifts and throw the cardboard away. um, I think all that contributes to a larger crisis that we see
mhm.
as a cumulative result of our smaller actions, and you know yeah, and I think that's the result of all our bad habits.
What, according to you, in your childhood, was one sustainable thing that was so obvious that now people hype it up?
Packing, yeah, packing your food wherever you go in a small box, whether you went for a holiday, whether you went, to play at somebody's house. We all our khana used to be packed in a tiffin box, and now it's just like
Mm.
Blinkit pe order kar do, Zomato pe order kar do, order ho jayega, you know. I think
Mhm.
just carrying your own dabbas around was the most sustainable habit that our parents taught us.
Right. For me, it was handing down second-hand clothes to your siblings
Yeah,
and wearing the same clothes, what your sister used to wear and then you wearing. Those kind of things were like
it's the norm.
those handmade, that was a norm, and then making a pocha out of it, and then using it in different places, that used to be quite a norm. And now there are pre-loved groups and pre-loved apps that where you can do all this, sell your clothes. Earlier I used to remember, you have one wedding lehenga and a lot of people around you would wear that, masis and chachis, and they
Yeah,
would interchange ki maine is shaadi mein pehen liya, now you wear it. But now I don't know, it has become such a
taboo.
taboo, and no, there was this was a taboo, and now this is a money making idea. People now sell pre-loved clothes and thrifted clothes, and we make a big deal out of it. But thrifting, I feel, was
It's
in
a
our
steal.
culture long back. Yeah, we
Yeah.
stopped doing that, and then when Western countries started doing that, we named it thrifting, and then we started monetizing it.
No, I agree. I feel also like with apps like Shein or everything becoming so cheap and accessible that you don't feel the need to thrift क्योंकि पहले purchasing power इतनी नहीं थी. The brands were expensive. So अगर किसी ने
Hmm.
कोई Gap या Benetton की sweater या shirt खरीदा, you had to pass it down. You couldn't just throw it away, right? But now everything is available at like 100% discount almost on Amazon, like, big day sale, whatever. Or, it's that you have accessibility to everything, and the purchasing power in India as a country is just
No.
increasing. So, I think you don't feel the need to like thrift. I mean, but having said that, I have two kids, and my older daughter was like, I have no shoes, and she was like, why does Dia have so many shoes? I'm like, look at your shoes; they're all your old shoes. So I think I guess uh, there are other aspects of sustainability that I practice that I don't even know. But this reminds me of
Yeah.
my daughter a pair of shoes because
Okay. This was lovely. Thank you for being here. It was lovely chatting with you.
yeah.